All right. Hello and welcome, everybody. I'm so happy to be here today with all of you and with my very dear good friend, Jonathan Coe, who I've had many conversations with. I don't know how many at this point. But for any of you not familiar with Jonathan, highly recommend following his podcast, his work in general. Yeah, you're an astrologer, you're a musician, you're so many things. And most of all, what I love about our connection, among other things, is how easily we just relate
Mhm.
and and how we flow and how it's so like we were just dropping in and before we started recording, and it just feels, the energy feels like a direct heart to heart connection, and then just so playful and easy and good.
Yes. Thank you, Martha. I'm so excited to be here and just, yeah, really grateful for your presence and for your work and just all the incredible things you do in this world. And yeah, I really love our unseen connections because they like one another.
Yeah, definitely.
For sure.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sure we will talk about, Jonathan and I both have what, Virgo? Our birthdays are basically the same day, pretty much.
Yep. Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and so we both have Pisces sun and Virgo rising, right?
Yeah.
And different moons, but
Different moons, but both mutable moons,
both,
because
yep,
you have Virgo moon and I have Gemini moon, and also both ruled by Mercury. So
yes. And we both have
yeah,
Mercury in Pisces.
yes,
Yes.
correct.
So that explains, why it's just so easy.
hmm
So
I
awesome.
think there's definitely a lot of cosmic and energetic connections
Yeah.
in our charts. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then we bring in, different angles, right? Like at the
hmm
same time, we have that similarity. There's so much similarity. Then
Yeah.
you bring in that Gemini, I bring in the extra Virgo, and, lots of other stuff too. But
hmm
um, yeah. So, so to get to the point here, yeah, so I'm super excited because what we're going to be talking about today is this eclipse season.
hmm
And one of the things that's really significant about this eclipse season is that it is the first eclipse we're having where we're being introduced to the energy of the Pisces Virgo dance, which again
Yeah.
is very alive in both of our charts. And so I'm really excited to dive into that with you. I think we might also weave in the fact that as I was looking at the charts of this eclipse season and then the charts of next eclipse season, actually,
Mm.
both times Mars is going to be in Cancer. And in
Right.
this eclipse season, Mars is going to be exactly squaring the nodes during the eclipses. So it's like really
hmm
prominent. Mars is also ruling the North Node right now and will be
Yeah.
ruling the solar eclipse next eclipse season. So there's something really significant to me about this Mars and Cancer energy. And you and I have talked about Mars before in a previous conversation. And anyway,
Right. That was actually recorded. I think that was near the eclipse too, Martha.
yeah, it was like a year
Right?
ago. Mhm.
Right? Yeah,
Yes.
because I
Yeah.
remember, yeah, that was before I launched this Mars container I was facilitating and we were talking about it. So yeah, for
Mhm.
sure. Yeah.
Mhm.
hmm This
Yes. Here
Mars
we
brings
are
us
again.
together.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would love to start with, yeah, what, just on a personal level, when you're feeling into it, we're recording this on Thursday, September 12th. So the first
Mhm.
eclipse of this season is going to be technically in 5 days, but we're definitely in the energy of it already, right? Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, what's alive in you, just in your being? What's
hmm
going on for you?
Yeah. I think when you were speaking, I was really feeling into a question you asked me before we started recording, which is this kind of off-kilter situation we have with the eclipses, right? So we have the North Node, South Node in Aries and Libra, And then the full moon on the 17th happens in the Virgo Pisces axis, right? So when we think about the pair of Aries and Libra, to me, that has a very different energy than Virgo and Pisces, right? I mean, one is, we can think about Aries and Libra being cardinal, right? Cardinal signs start something. So there's something about eclipses that we've been having since last October-ish, that really points us to a new beginning, right? That points us to ways of relating to the self and to the others that are new and that wants to come out, maybe. And along with that, whenever we're trying to make space for something new, we're also always kind of releasing something, right? And I think with this Virgo Pisces full moon happening as well, both of them being mutable signs have this energy of kind of decomposing, right? It has this energy of like wrapping things up. It has this energy of um, rearranging the energy a little bit so that it can transition into something else, right? And to me, it's like, think about, it's making me think about like sometimes how, you might be I'm guilty as charged. I'm bringing in a very personal example here of, you maybe received a catalog for a furniture, right? And you're looking through it and you're like, oh, I really want this couch. But you have a couch in your apartment, right? First, you need to figure out what to do with that couch before you can buy another couch that can live in your apartment. So I feel like this specific, like when we're looking at September 17th, specifically like that lunation, has this energy of illuminating that which needs to be released, that which needs to be decomposed in order to bring in a new way of being. And I think that is always a very challenging place to be, right? Because if anyone listening is anything like me, like I'm always excited to start the new things, right? Like I don't want to think about organizing my stuff. Like I don't want to think about, making space on my computer and like backing things up and deleting files, right? I want to just start doing the fun stuff. So I think that there may be a little bit of that push and pull with this specific lunation that's really inviting us to look at what what haven't what are we in a process of releasing, but we're incomplete with that releasing process. Like maybe we still have stuck points, maybe we still have attachments, maybe we still have um yeah, like we some part of our identity is still, attached to the thing, right? And it's still hard for us to let it go. And where are we starting to be ready for a new thing, for a new way of being? And I don't think this new way of being is totally new either. Like because this North Node has been with us for some time, the North and South Node situation being in Aries and Libra, I think we've been considering it for some time, and I think a lot of it has to do wherever it falls in our charts, it has to do with um how being in right relationships and having the right kind of relationship dynamics with other people actually becomes fuel to help us be more brave, right? To help us be more of ourselves. I think there's something I've been tracking with this Libra Aries situation is how healing some of the relationship patterns that are not really working for me, that have never really worked, right? But somehow I kept on to them because I felt like they kept me safe, they gave me belonging, they make me feel useful, right? um like needed to go out, and it was really painful for a while, right? But I think after more of that has been kind of exercised out of the system, what you start to see is more of you can then come in, which comes with its own sets of problems. Like I think we have this habit in our culture. Like you and I live in the US, Martha. I feel like the American culture has this what I think is actually a real problem. Like we talk about authenticity as if authenticity is going to solve all of our problems. It never does, right? It just brings you into the room so you know whether you're in the right room or not. But
Oh, but
just being yourself is not going to solve the problems. It's not going to solve the problem. So I think this is something that I've been in constant contemplation with. Does that answer your question?
yeah, I mean, that's a great jumping off point. There's so much there. It's like, wow. Yeah, I mean, I have been thinking that's the biggest theme for me in this eclipse season for sure is relationships and in I feel so much potential for us to be coming into new, but I love how you're saying it's maybe not so new
Mm,
ways of relating. Definitely. Big time. Like I feel the energy of the first eclipse on September 17th as this big release. I didn't even, you're bringing in the fact that it's mutable signs. I didn't even think about that fact. I was thinking about it
mhm.
being Pisces and Virgo, which
Yeah.
happen to be mutable signs, but um yeah, I definitely feel like it's that first eclipse feels like this opportunity to let go on such radical levels, like big Pisces full moon on the North Node, like radical forgiveness, just like not even not like a sense of suddenly condoning things that were not cool, but just
Mhm.
this energy of just letting it go
Yeah.
in service of being able to move on to the new. And then the solar eclipse on October 2nd is a new moon
Mhm.
in Libra.
Yeah.
What's so interesting is that it's a new moon in Libra on the south node, right?
Mhm.
So that kind of I didn't even think about that either. What you're saying also kind of makes sense that it's like that then we have an opportunity to be releasing in that first eclipse, and then we have this super strong, powerful opportunity to start a new
Mhm.
something, but it's on the south node, so maybe bringing in, I don't know, gifts of how do you feel that the fact that it's a new moon in Libra on the south node?
In Libra and the South Node, yeah. I'm gonna also bring in the piece, Martha, of how that new moon in Libra, right? I'm going to just look at it
Do you want me to
in
pull
my
it up?
software. Yeah, sure. Why not? We can take a look at it together too.
Yeah.
Um, I was also really thinking about how that new moon, right, is ruled by um Venus in Scorpio, because I think some of the significations in my vocabulary, there's some overlap there, or maybe not even overlap, but there's an exposition, right? A deepening of the significations that we're already maybe seeing with that new moon being so close to the south node, right? If we think about just the new moon in Libra very closely conjoining the south node, I think there's something here about planting new seeds. Like whenever I think about new moon, I always think about planting new seeds. But a reminder that seeds can only really grow in the dark, right? Seeds only grow in the underworld. And Libra is such an interesting sign because in pop astrology, people really like to talk about Libra as like shopping, and like just kind of this light and not having a lot of substance airhead. And I really dislike that because if you live in the Northern Hemisphere, Libra season is such a rich and complex season, right? It's like a preparation of the descent into the underworld. When
Mm-mm.
you walk around, right, in Libra season, you see, Martha, the dead leaves right next to the leaves that are still very green, right? You see
Yes.
this really rich um collection. Like, I don't even know if collection is the right word, but you see this really rich symphony of um all kinds of different notes happening at the same time, right? Like life coexisting with death, life making way for that which is dying, because it knows that the dying process is necessary to bring us back into the surface in the spring with Aries, right? So Libra is Libra to me has a lot to do with the art of dying to keep the cycle of life. That's what I see Libra. And I think about the south node, right? As you know, in traditional astrology, people talk about the south node being the tail of the dragon, or the bowel of the dragon, right? That's disembodied from the head of the dragon, and the the bowel of the dragon couldn't help but release. So there's something here about releasing, I think, deep things that were at the level of the soil itself, right? When you're thinking about this in terms of plants or in terms of growing things, we all know how difficult it is to grow things when the soil itself has problems. So to me, this particular new moon has a lot to do with really taking an assessment of like what's your soil here, right? And how healthy is your soil? Because if your soil is unhealthy, it's not going to nothing good's going to come out of it, right? And thinking about it as being ruled by Venus and Scorpio, there's also a piece here around detox for me. Like
Mhm.
there's so much here around um Venus and Scorpio is, again, in traditional astrology, it's where Venus is not at home, right? It's where Venus is in detriment, which doesn't mean that Venus in Scorpio doesn't have gifts, right? Venus is still Venus. Venus will always do Venusian things, no matter where Venus is. But she may not have access to the resources that she wants, or she may not find it very easy for her to access those resources. And so Venus needs to get creative in Scorpio, right? One mythology I think about with Venus and Scorpio is Inanna descending into the underworld, right?
Definitely.
It's this idea that sometimes for love, you have to let go of all these adornments, right? If we think about it psychologically, it's like this idea of shadow work and like letting go of our ego attachments so that we can connect more deeply with the true self, right? Or the higher self, or self with capital S, however you want to talk about it, right? So there's something here I think that has to do with you know, thinking again about Libra as a cardinal sign, we're definitely starting something. We're definitely starting a cycle that is connected to being in right relationship with the world around us, with the people around us, with beauty itself, and how in this particular lunation, what's being asked of us may be to detox. You know, it's like pulling the weeds in your backyard so that you can grow the garden you've always wanted to grow, right? Yeah.
Wow. Can
It's a
I?
lot of work. This two lunations, it's a lot of work, I think, Martha. And you know, with I think earlier you mentioned Mars in Cancer too. Um, to me, Mars in Cancer is, you know, where we can get a little bit pulled away from the kind of vitality that Mars likes to have access to, right? And it may slow us down a little bit. Like to me, Mars in Cancer is not a very fast moving um it's not a very fast moving archetype, right? There's something about it that does have to do with slowing down, that does have to do with noticing the places where we are in pain
Hmm.
and tending to that. You know, to me, Mars in Cancer has more to do with like it's giving me this imagery of a soldier that really needed to tend to their wounds before going back out, you know, or this explorer, maybe if soldier is too triggering an imagery for you, think about it as like this brave explorer, right? Who, um, you know, maybe have to really look at their ankles. You know, maybe their ankles were injured a couple years ago, and before they go out on their next big adventure, they really need to take a look at that ankle, right? Yeah.
I'm thinking about two things. I mean, one is on the in terms of slowing down, I find it really interesting. You know, Saturn is retrograde still in its eclipse season, and the first eclipse is going to be exactly opposite Mercury. Do I have that right? Yeah, it's going to be opposite Mercury, right? So I've been thinking about that. Um, because yeah, those of us with strong Pisces placements probably have either Saturn or this full moon or Neptune aspecting our chart somehow. Yes, for me, right?
Yes.
Uh, yeah. So anyway, yeah. So there's another element of with Saturn going retrograde, opposing that Mercury. I do kind of wonder if there's still this element of, okay, we need to slow this process down a little bit, which might feel frustrating sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, I want to move. I want to
Yeah.
do this. But like, I don't know, what is the gift in this, or what do we still need to kind of align with? How do you feel that if we bring that in?
Yeah, I agree with that, Martha. And also, just looking at this currently where the screen is showing the full moon in September 17th, right?
Yeah.
And this specific lunation is one that I've been tracking for some time since the beginning of the year. And I'm like, wow, this one's not easy. This is
Hmm.
not an easy uh full moon because I think this full moon is really speaking to discrepancy. And with the added presence or dominance of a lot of mutable signs here, mutable signs are really interesting, right? Because one way that I conceptualize mutable signs is that mutable signs are the problem solver of the zodiac, right? Mutable signs kind of come in and look at what the cardinal and the fixed signs have been doing, and they're like, no, let me rearrange this. Let me prepare the vehicle so that we can move forward, right?
Yeah.
Like, thanks for all the work, right? We need to rearrange this. Like you mentioned earlier, Martha, my background in music, and I had a couple years where I was working as like what do we call it? Like people who work on stage, right? Like I was working in production and I was working on a lot of like stage stuff. And something that people don't like to talk about a lot is the level of skill and procedure and system necessary in order to effectively break down a stage, right? We like to prepare the stage because we know that that's going to lead to the performance, right? So if we think about the cardinal signs set up the stage so that the actors can perform, right? And then the fixed signs shine their light, right? They perform the music, they perform the play, and mutable signs are the ones breaking down the stage. You know,
Wow.
without that process of breaking down the stage, you can't have the next day's performance,
Mm.
right? But by that time, everybody's tired, you know? Like the euphoria of the performance has worn off, right? The anxiety of the pre-performance has worn off. So the question I think that lies at the heart of working with mutable signs is this question of what do we do when we feel so tired?
Mm.
Overwhelm and tiredness, I think, are very real experiences for mutable signs, right? And all of us have mutable signs. I'm not just talking about mutable suns here. I'm
Yeah.
talking about the mutable placements in our chart, right? The mutable signs are kind of the anti-climax of the zodiac. The mutable signs do the work that's necessary, right? So that we can continue living. Like you can think of this too in terms of digestion. What happens after we eat and we're digesting our food? We get a little sleepy, right?
Mm.
And it's like it puts us in a bit of a haze. And I think this particular lunation, not only are the sun and the moon in mutable signs, right? But as you mentioned, Martha, Saturn is in Pisces, Mercury is in Virgo, and Jupiter is in Gemini, right?
Yeah.
And all of this is very, especially when I think you have a T square or you have a, a, a cross, the experience on a felt somatic level can just be complete overwhelm. Like I
Mm.
think when I think about what's challenging about working with mutable signs is um mutable signs, there's not one answer with mutable signs. There's always multiple answers. And I think a lot of us as humans, we have evolved to want a simple solution, right? If only I do XYZ, then all the problems will be solved, right? If only X person gets elected, everything, justice will be restored. We will have no trouble, right? Like we want that, we're so obsessed with this idea of the solution. But I think with mutable signs, the solution is always surprising.
Mm,
Hmm. And surprises are taxing to the nerve, can be taxing to the nervous system, right? The nervous system that's able to work with surprises are really resource and regulated nervous systems.
mm,
So I think that with this lunation, there's something about staying nimble. There's something about trusting that um, there are always multiple perspectives on things. If you identify as being a creator or being an artist, you might find that the the projects you've been working hard on don't give you the results that you wanted, right? You
mm,
came in wanting a certain result and you get another result. And that's where I think we can choose to either be disappointed or we can choose to shift our perspective, right? And continue to um, go along with the flow, and kind of make the best out of the situations that we've been given. Um, there's also a lot of training ground energy that I'm sensing from this specific lunation. Like when I think about um, how the main story, right, is really that um Libra and Aries nodal story, right? The story is still about building something new, starting a new cycle. um when I think about the North Node in Aries, I keep thinking about letting your freak flag fly.
mm.
Like to me, Aries is like, you know what, I think this is really cool, I want to do it, it looks like nobody else wants to do it with me, I'm gonna go alone.
Awesome. Hmm.
Aries has that energy, right? Like I'm gonna chart the path. I'm going to go in that direction anyway, right? Um, and the main story is still that, but I think where our attention is maybe being directed or highlighted towards is really considering all the different options, right? Because um, embracing more of that multidimensionality will make the Aries Libra story richer and more multidimensional and more human, I think, ultimately. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm thinking a couple other things there. Um, One is I'm really relating to what you're saying about Aries because, I have my South Node in Aries, I have my Venus in Aries, and
Yeah.
I'm feeling in that Aries part of myself, I have very clear ideas of what I want, when I want it now. And and I think I'm right also, right? Like I have a clear vision of I want this and it's the right thing and blah blah blah. And then at the same time, there's all this, like you're saying, this sort of slowing down energy, especially Saturn sitting right on my sun, going retrograde. It's like so I love what it's very actually soothing for this
Mhm.
Aries part of me where it's awesome that I have this vision. It's awesome that I'm so clear. It's awesome that I'm totally dedicated to going my way, just like you're saying, all of it. And then this mutable energy, and especially with Saturn there in Pisces on my sun, and all of it. Yeah, I'm getting it, right? Like that, okay, the seeds that have been planted in that rich soil that we're really still tilling that soil, I feel like, and we're still enriching it. I can't know actually what that new plant is meant to be. And I kind of like my Aries self needs to let go a little bit. Like, uh, does that fit
Yes.
with what you're saying?
Absolutely. I mean, the other day, I had a mentor tell me something that really struck me because she said, it's about being bold without being attached to the outcome.
Yeah.
It's about like letting your full expression be seen, right?
Mm,
And that actually takes a lot of work. Like
yeah.
again, we live in a culture that almost feels like, oh, authenticity is like the answer, right? And it's gonna make you feel so good. But usually when we're being really authentic, what happens is, um, yes, something expands, but something also shrinks. Like something I notice with, practicing radical honesty and radical authenticity is oftentimes people don't like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's okay, right, Martha? I think that the thing is maybe the bigger problem is we have this cultural story that like if we like one another, we have to like all aspects of the person. When, in reality, we're such multidimensional beings, and we might connect from, one aspect of us connect with another aspect of another person, right? And it's okay that we like certain parts of a person and we don't necessarily resonate with other parts of them. Um, and I think that doesn't have to be a problem, but sometimes it does feel like a problem. And so what I've noticed is when we just let ourselves really do the things that we want to do, kind of in that Aries way, sometimes the consequence is we feel unseen by the world around us because it may be that what's really being emanated as a frequency is so unique to you that people need a hot minute, right? To
Yeah.
be like, wait, what's going on here? What's happening?
Who is she?
Like,
Who is, yeah. Who are they?
who are they? Who are they? So yeah, I think maybe, the moral of the story with the upcoming lunation, um, the full moon in on September 17th is trusting that you're still moving in the right direction, right? Or giving yourself permission to kind of just double check to see that you are still moving in the same direction, but being open to surprises, being open to zigzags, right? That maybe the strategy you initially came up with um, is not going to work for the specific moment. Like that's not what the moment is asking for. So how can you embrace um yeah, how can you embrace mutability,
Yeah. And
flexibility?
yeah.
Yeah.
And they'll bring in one more component, which is I love how you pointed out that at the new moon, at the solar eclipse, Venus, who's going to be ruling, is going to be ruling the south node and the new moon, is going to be in Scorpio. Okay, so what's ruling Venus? Pluto, who just moved back into Capricorn, right?
Yeah,
And
right.
so I would love to bring in that element because that to
Mhm,
me, the Pluto having just re-entered Capricorn is actually for me the most base note, like fundamental energetic going on through this whole time. So
mhm,
so for anybody who doesn't know, Pluto re-entered Capricorn on September 1st, and it's going to be there until November 19th, I want to say. So 2.5
mhm.
months. And this was the last time in this lifetime, in these bodies, that Pluto will be in Capricorn. And it's just
Right.
dipping just barely into the very end of Capricorn. So,
Mhm.
so again, I feel that tilling of the soil, like that we're still unearthing things literally. Um, I don't know. So bring in that. What are you feeling with that?
Yeah, the imagery that came up in my mind as you were talking about it, Martha, was this is like that last stretch of the demolition, right? I live in New York City, so whenever I walk around, I always see a lot of these different grounds, being demolished, right? Like old buildings demolished, and then they're trying to build a new building. And to me, this last stretch of Pluto in Capricorn is going to show us where the old structures are still hanging on, and it's like really time to like get to the bottom of it, right? Before we can build that new structure, before we can look to a different orientation with Pluto in Aquarius. Because to me, Pluto in Aquarius, I mean, may it be known, right? This is still Pluto we're talking about. Like Pluto in Aquarius is not going to solve all of our problems.
Yeah, absolutely. Hmm.
I feel like your listeners now are like sensing, my level of pessimism. It's not that I'm pessimistic, but I do feel that um Pluto Pluto is interesting, right? Pluto is very slow moving. There's a tendency to almost forget Pluto. I think both in the psyche and also astronomically, right? Pluto gets Plutoed out. Pluto gets kind of left behind, you know? And when we think about Pluto and Aquarius, so before I answer your question about Pluto and Capricorn, I think it's important for us to maybe talk a bit about Pluto and Aquarius because, the first stretch of Pluto and Aquarius we've seen, what I've tracked, right, and this is just really personal to me, is the ways in which because it's ushering in a new era, we don't know how to relate to this yet, right? It's like AI is such a great example of this. Like people say all kinds of things about AI that I'm like, will humans ever really be slaves to the machines? I really doubt that. Honestly, I really doubt that because I believe if you look at all kinds of stories, right, from various time periods and various cultures, we know that humanity's worst enemy has always been itself.
Mm.
We never really had any other enemies. That's at least what I've observed, right? That the real problem was always us,
Mm.
you know? And so it's not about if, AI will do this, bring this doom, right? It's more about what are we going to do with AI to further perpetuate the doom that we're already doing to ourselves?
Oh no.
Like,
Right.
how is AI becoming yet another accelerator of our self-undoing? And
Mm.
to me, Pluto is about doing the Pluto work has to do with doing that work, right? It's about asking ourselves, like, where are we unwittingly and unconsciously bringing ourselves to places where we're, yeah, participating in our own self-undoing,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
That we're not conscious of. Yeah,
Mhm. And
yeah,
outsourcing our power.
yes,
For me,
yes,
Pluto is ultimately about what is real power. And wherever Pluto is, I think we have the opportunity to either outsource our power or find it, claim it, be it.
100%.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't say that better myself. So when we look at it in terms of Pluto and Capricorn, I think Pluto and Capricorn is going to show us places where we're still maybe tied to older societal structures, right? Older ways of, and some of it is not just outside, right? Some of it is inside as well. Like the other day, I was listening to a podcast, and this is totally I don't know. I guess it depends on who's listening to this, but to me, I'm like, oh yeah, I can see where that argument is coming from, but how interesting, right? Um, there was an ad on this podcast, and they were talking about if you choose a bank, wouldn't you want your bank to be boring? Like you don't want your bank to be inventive, like you want a boring bank, And I was thinking, do we really want a boring bank? Like, do I want a boring bank? I don't know. I mean, I can see the conventional wisdom of that, right? But it's like, this is something that has been installed in a lot of us,
Mm.
right? Like we think that certain things, I hear this all the time from people in my generation, um, around like wanting politics to be boring,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And we all know where that has taken us.
Mm.
Like when we just let politics be in the hands of politicians, we stop reflecting on how much power we're giving away to governments, right? And if we want to give that much power away, and I think with Pluto, because Pluto is also um an outer planet, there is kind of a collective tone to it as well, right? It's not just personal work. It's kind of this collective unconscious, as Jung would probably say. So yeah, I think this last stretch of Pluto and Capricorn, um, on a very personal level, will probably show us places where we're still relying on outdated modes of being and modes of thinking that probably very conducive to moving into this Pluto and Aquarius um era,
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
totally. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, in, I don't know if you even you're gonna like this question,
Go
but
for it.
curious. And you can amend my question if you if anyway, if you could envision Pluto in Aquarius reality or energetic in your perfect world, in not necessarily perfect world, but in if it could go the way that you would like it to go, what does that
Mm.
look like? Like, what is,
Mm.
rather than us sending ourselves to doom, like, what's an alternative that you would personally love to embrace?
Yeah, that's such a great question, Martha. I'm gonna give my answer from, September 12th, 2024,
Yeah.
right? Um, I think there's so much potential for us um to really get our facts straight about what technology can do and what technology can't do. To me, ultimately, all of the air signs have to do with being in right relationship
Mm.
and being in right relationship with our life force, right? Because when we think about air, air is about it is connected to spirit. When we think about breathing, right? Breathing is related to spirit. And so I think a lot about how, for example, um, some of my most cherished, beloved, and respected voice teachers are air sign sons. And
Mm.
and you can think about singing as being connected to air signs, right? Because singing is about taking this breath, which is accessible, available, I guess, universally, right? Into your body, right? Which you know, I'm mindful that not everybody has ease breathing, right? But if you're alive, chances are you do have the apparatus to breathe, right? And then learning how to create something out of it, right? It's about exercising agency and exercising creativity to um, express in a way that is authentic and true, right? And honoring of the fact that we have been given life. So I know that's kind of meta and big and vague, but what I see with Pluto and Aquarius is that Aquarius is fixed air, right? So fixed air has something to do with the system itself. If we think about what is fixed air in the body, maybe we can think about it as the lungs, right? It's like this the connection between the rib cage and the lungs, right? It's that which is needed in order to process all of that airflow and the air coming in and out, right? So I think with Pluto and Aquarius, it's about um not being satisfied with having like um basic watered down information.
Mm.
I think Pluto and Aquarius has to do with getting to the bottom of the complexity of where knowledge even comes from,
Mm.
right? Because when we get to the bottom of that, we get to see how knowledge is actually never objective.
Mm.
Knowledge is part, um, is always part cosmology. It's making me think about like how Saturn and the relationship between Saturn and Jupiter,
I
right?
was yeah.
Right? Yeah,
Mm.
there's a connection, I think, between our knowledge and our ways of knowing and what we believe, and the idea of what's even real, what's even reality. I think this question of, there's a branch of there's a branch of study called ontology, right? That is basically asking the question of like, what's real? What do we consider real and what do we not consider real within a specific context, right? And going to the heart of that and really asking ourselves, like, is that life-giving? For example, like you and I have had this conversation, Martha, over the years of um, how the scientific materialist worldview in which the field of psychology, right, exists within and operates within, doesn't take the spiritual dimension or spirits as being real,
Yeah.
and what is the consequence of that, right? Because ultimately, who knows what's real or what's not? I'm a Pisces sun, so I'm always like, I don't know. I
Yeah.
can't, I can't tell you what is real and what's not real. But what I can tell you is that your mind provides a template that then decides what's real and what's not real, right? It's like there is that very famous saying of how, or study that says, different cultures, when they don't have specific words for different colors, it's almost like they can't see that color,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just reading something about that actually. Yep.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I think Pluto in Aquarius, to kind of simplify my answer to Pluto in Aquarius, I would say um, Pluto in Aquarius is an investigation into our relationship with technology, our relationship with knowledge, and how we organize knowledge. Yeah. And I don't know if there's an ideal outcome I want to see, but I'm more interested in the process that we engage in,
Mm.
right? Like rather than just really easily getting into like glorifying technology or being really afraid of technology, can we start to see technology as an extension of us? And
Mm.
also kind of like as a virus, right? Because it's in some ways it's also impacting us. Like whether we like it or not, the Pandora's box has been opened. You can't go back. There is no such thing as going back. I think one of the biggest perils of the Western centric way of thinking is believing that there was a better time. There was never a better time, my friends. I believe that's what I believe. I believe that every period has its own perils and they have their own unique challenges and they have their own unique gifts. And I think air signs are always inviting us to be in a much more rigorous and um, questioning and um, deep relationship with that, right? Like really giving ourselves permission to ask the big questions and ask the complicated questions and not necessarily worry about the answers. That there's something about it's kind of like that quote by Rilke, right? Of living into the question,
Mm.
right? It's not about finding the answers, it's about living into the question. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm thinking, so I'm thinking about Pluto and Aquarius, then at least in modern version would be ruled by Uranus in Taurus, right? And
Mm.
so that for me, that brings in the reality of similar to what you're saying, like bridging Earth in our relationship to intelligence and in our relationship to, yeah, what we know and our alignment with what we know. So basically, in so many different ways, in what you're saying, what I'm feeling is the importance of holding all of life in the reality of what it is, which is not linear or static, right? Like I think we often want an answer similar to that, my Aries energy wanting to find the solution, get it done. I want the thing I want when I want it, which is right now. you know, it's like we have a tendency, and the way that our culture has been shaped, uh it has this erroneous idea that there is a one truth, one answer that you can put in a box and you
Mhm.
can, and it's going to stay that way. The truth is going to stay in the one box. And that's not really actually how life works, right? Like
Mhm.
everything is cyclical, everything is in motion constantly, everything
Yeah.
is more like the shape of our galaxy is not a line. It's,
Mhm.
like the Fibonacci sequence, right, is really
Yeah.
a fundamental structure of how most of life works. And it's not a line and it's not a
Mhm.
single dot either.
Yeah.
It in constant rhythm.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
yeah. And so the same thing with knowledge and what do we know or what can we know?
Mhm.
I think one way I'm feeling what you're saying is that it's like we have this opportunity to let go of. It's hard. It's hard. Speaking for myself, it's hard, but to let go of needing or wanting the truth, the one solution, the one answer that like suddenly everything is perfect after XYZ,
Yeah.
and being more about going with the flow of what life actually is.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
There was something you were saying there that's reminding me, Martha, of something I heard the other day. So I've been studying human design pretty deeply, and one of my teachers shared this quote by Ra, who is the founder of the human design, the guy who received the human design transmission. And he said something about one of the centers, which is the root center. And he said, um, the problem with having an undefined or open root is that uh, you're always trying to stop the pressure of life. Like you're always responding to a certain pressure you're feeling in your life, and you're always trying to get it off your system.
Mm,
And what he said is you actually can't do that because life is pressure.
mm, mm, mm.
And the only time when you will have completely no pressure is when you're dead.
Wow.
And I think that also applies here, right? Like, you know, I just saw this really provocative uh reel on Instagram, Martha, and I'm forgetting now who said it, but there was this woman who was a little bit older, and I think she's an author, and she said she was teaching a class, and in that clip she was saying, Descartes is uh famous for saying, I think, therefore I am. But actually, that's not the whole of the quote. The whole of the quote is more like, um, I doubt myself, right? And in that doubting, I a, a thought process is initiated, and that's how I kind of know myself. And I think that's so interesting because that's so different
Very
than I
different.
think the popularized, the butchered version that we see floating out there, which is just like, I think, therefore I am. If one does not think, then one therefore is not, right? It's not saying that necessarily, or maybe we can consider that Descartes wasn't really saying that. It was more this aspect of knowing the self through the questioning, knowing the self through the doubting, right? Um, as someone, and maybe you experience this too, Martha, as someone who also has your sun moon rising in mutable signs. But
Yeah.
I feel like, a constant throughout my life is questioning myself.
Mm, mm.
If the marker of spiritual attainment is the complete eradication of self-doubt, I am the most unenlightened person in in the room because every time I come to an answer, more questions always come up, and what I've learned walking this particular lifetime with this very mutable chart is that there's actually no problem with the questions or the questionings, and it's more that I've been taught to be afraid of the questions, right?
Mm.
But if I retrain myself to not be afraid when I'm experiencing self-doubt, then actually it's so fun to experience that because I'm kind of like, oh, okay, I guess that's gonna lead me somewhere, and then that's gonna lead me somewhere. And I think um in my life it's been more about like how do we navigate that with the practicality of life, right? Because ultimately all of us listening to this, I mean, who knows, but I think the majority of us listening to this probably have to pay our bills, right? Probably have to eat, and we all have these kind of limitations in our lives, and navigating the constant questioning with having a good enough answer, I think it's like that to me is wisdom. Wisdom is about giving ourselves permission to ask the questions and to be curious and to maybe not even, and to be open to the possibility that maybe the answer doesn't even exist, right?
I
You
love
know, right? But at the same time, I think wisdom, especially for, those of us who maybe resonate with some aspect of being a modern mystic, is about being like, okay, that's a good enough answer. I can live with that, right? And then moving on, to speak to this um Venus and Aries part that you were mentioning, right? Like to the Aries part of us, like, yes, the womb of the Pisces is really nice. But at some point, like we gotta have our own adventure. We gotta get out, right?
Yeah. I mean, the Pisces part of me, which is very strong, as you know, it's like I can let go, I can just be in bliss, no problem. And then my Venus and Aries comes in is like, but I want to do it.
Yeah.
Wow. Come on, let's go.
Yeah. Yeah. That is how my Saturn and my Mars in Capricorn feel a lot of the times. It's like, okay, thank you, Pisces, thank you, Gemini. We have
Yeah.
enough, we've had enough meditations, we have enough downloads, we read enough books. Now it's time to try it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, as you're talking, I'm thinking, of course, right now for all of us, Jupiter again in Gemini. It's like, we don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
it can celebrate not knowing, actually, and that we get to be in the not knowing. I don't know.
Mhm.
Plus, and then Jupiter in Gemini is doing this squaring dance with Saturn in Pisces, and they're, you know, so yeah, so Saturn, which is supposed to give us the structures, is in Pisces. Like, yet again, we don't really know in this other way. And they're dancing together, right? But there's a
Yeah.
gift in that dance. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
ah,
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I think, this it's interesting, Martha. I'm feeling myself wanting to take a left turn a little bit, and I'm curious to hear your perspective on, I know you track a lot of the asteroids, and I'm curious if you also see any kind of asteroid, um, movements or the asteroids playing a significant role in some of, in the next two lunations specifically. Yeah,
oh yeah, big
tell
time.
me. I'm curious.
Yeah, well, and actually, for anybody listening, um, I just did an eclipse workshop 2 days ago, which is going to
Oh.
have two parts to it. And
Mhm.
so the first part already happened and it's recorded and available. And I talk a lot about various goddess energies in there. And then there's going to be a part two on October 1st. So
Mm.
anybody who wants like to go really deeply, more deeply into stuff, I'll put the link for that. But
Amazing. Glad I asked.
yeah, no. Yeah, but let me show you. Okay. And then I would love before we end to talk a little more about Mars and Cancer because I have one more question for you about that.
Mm, mhm.
Um, but yes, let's bring in the goddesses. Um, Actually, not only goddesses, it's also more than that. Okay, so let me bring up my really complicated chart. Just ignore ignore how complicated this is going to look for a second, just so I can remember what I want to speak to here. No, wait. Is that everything? Yeah. Okay. Um, okay, so which asteroids are really alive for me? Number one, the biggest of our asteroids is Ceres, right? She's actually a dwarf planet. And she has been squaring the nodes of the moon, and she's going to still be squaring the nodes of the moon on that first eclipse. And she's actually going to be opposite Mars, which is fascinating to me. So I'd
Yeah.
like to bookmark that in a second because I would love to hear a little more from you about Mars in Cancer. But one thing I feel in this Mars in Cancer, opposite Ceres in Capricorn, squaring the nodes on the eclipse, definitely for me, it feels like there's a layer of grief, maybe, in this letting go, that there's a really important role for grief. And again, the underworld, the need to hold space for life and death as part of the whole cycle of everything, right? Ceres being the goddess whose daughter Persephone was abducted by Hades or Pluto. Um, and then Ceres went into this extreme rage and grief, and then she created winter because she was so angry that she decimated basically the earth in that sense. But then she found Persephone. Persephone came back, and then now we have seasons, right? We have spring and winter and summer and fall. Okay.
Right.
so series definitely is about like these seasons of life and the fact that it's not static. It's not just one moment in time. It's not that we always have spring or we always have summer. We have winter and we need to grieve when we're letting go. And Mars in Cancer being so, again, connected to our emotions and our emotional body. There's something really, really important for me in that.
Mm,
And then another big one through the whole eclipse season is Estrella.
mm,
Estrella is on the south node for the first eclipse, and then Estrella is exactly conjunct the new moon for the solar eclipse. And
mm,
Estrella, for anyone who doesn't know, is the goddess who was the last of the gods and goddesses to leave the earth. So in the time of the golden age, the gods and goddesses were living with the humans on the earth, and then uh the golden age started to wane and humans started getting violent and all of that. So the gods and goddesses one by one left. And eventually Estrella was the only one left here,
mm,
but she also got fed up.
mhm,
And she left and she went into the stars and she became the constellation of Virgo, which is a fascinating connection.
mhm,
um, and then the myth says when she returns, she will bring back the golden age.
mm,
So whenever I see Estrella really prominent in a chart or with any person's, like my son actually is natally conjunct Estrella in Pisces. So I think a lot of us, well, all of us, really, I think of Estrella as she is all of us. All of these goddesses are all of us. And she's the part of us that is the bridge of, like, we are here to quote unquote bring back the golden age or be the bridge between earth and sky or, whatever. We're light bearers, all of that.
yeah.
So there's definitely a gift of her energy there, big time.
Mhm,
And another one, not a goddess, actually a god, is Eros, is pretty darn prominent because Eros is conjunct Venus in that first eclipse opposite Chiron. Which is like, huh. So, so for me, Eros and actually Cupido,
mm,
who is the Latin version of Eros, Cupid, is conjunct Jupiter at this
mm,
eclipse.
mhm,
So there's this element of, I want to say, like sexuality and divine sexuality and just that life force of source that is everything. Definitely playing in to these for big time, right? It's like not only this dance of Libra Aries where we're thinking about relationship and how we relate and how we want to be in relationship, but also the element of sexuality and what is sexuality, what's healthy sexuality, what's divine sexuality, what's sacred
mm,
sexuality, how do we actually want to be in relationship to what eros is and that divine life force is and sexuality itself,
yeah.
but many layers of that. um yeah, so then, I mean, I'm sure there's more I could talk about, but does that give you some?
Yeah, that's gorgeous. Thank you, Martha. That's a really rich picture there. I'm really feeling the opposition, right, of Ceres and Mars for sure. I think it's really fascinating to see that. And I do think I see that opposition as support actually for Mars in Cancer. You know,
Ooh.
it really feels super supportive to me because, Ceres is kind of Ceres is the devoted mother archetype, right? This is not just like any good old mother archetype. This is like the mother who is like, who would not let her daughter just be taken away from her like that, right? And this is like a very strong, this is like a strong mother archetype, and when I think about Mars in Cancer, Mars, in the sign ruled by the moon is challenged. Cancer is um, a landscape that is ever changing. When I think about Cancer, I think about like, water under the moon that's kind of like moving left and right and doesn't really have any sort of directionality. Like the moon is moving really fast, and the moon is just kind of like moving, right? Moving for moving's sake. And I think Cancer in or Mars in Cancer, um, it can be a challenging placement for Mars because Mars needs direction, right? Mars needs vitality, or Mars needs like almost what feels like um, an impossible task. That's why Mars loves being in Scorpio, right? Because Mars is like deeper, deeper. But with feelings, it's like, um, I'm thinking about something that people say a lot, which is that, feelings don't actually mean anything, right? We can embrace our feelings, but when we attach meanings to our feelings, that's when we get confused sometimes because the meaning then lasts longer than the sensations of the feelings, right? Feelings are here. One way I conceptualize it in my own body and experiences, feelings are here because it's telling us what our body is wanting to do, right? For example, if I'm feeling sad, maybe my body just really wants to cry.
Yeah.
If I'm feeling frustrated, maybe my body just wants to scream, right? Like let it out and then kind of complete the process. And I think Mars is like, wait, what? That's it? you know? And I see that, especially that series in Capricorn feels to me like this, it's giving me this imagery of like, when we think about some mothers, right? There are mothers who are like, oh, poor child, like, let me coddle you when you fall down, right? Series in Capricorn is like, I know you got this. You can get up, right? Like
Mhm.
not mean about it, right? But just really firm. And sometimes like it's reminding me of one of my teachers, actually. I have a teacher who, if somebody said something that's kind of drawing outside of the container of the class, she's like, yep. And then that's it. We move on, right? Like when I think about one of the gifts of Capricorn is Capricorn can have this really clear demarcation of what's in the center of of sight, right? And Capricorn doesn't spend too much energy looking at, but what about this? But what about this? Capricorn is just like, okay, if we want to move forward, we have to keep our focus, right? And so I really like seeing that series opposing Mars because to me it's almost like Ceres is helping Mars a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And traditionally Mars loves being in Capricorn because Mars likes to have a direction. Like Mars needs a shopping list. It's like, okay, what am I if I'm bringing all this warrior energy to Trader Joe's, I need to know what I'm buying. Otherwise I'm just like wandering around and it's frustrating. That's how I see it. And I think Aries is kind of like, okay, Mars, you just cried. Here's some tissues. Let's get back up. We can do this, right? Yeah, there's kind of a gentle ferocity, I think, to that
That's
series
fast.
in Capricorn.
It's
Yeah, that's how I'm seeing it.
yeah, I can feel it. Well, and what I'm laughing partly because so I have my moon in Virgo on my ascendant, right? So I have a very strong, strong, strong moon, and I'm a mother. Okay. And my kids both have their moons in Capricorn. so as you're speaking, I'm noticing like in me as a mother, I'm I'm very like over the top touchy-feely, like, I love you, you're so cute. I want to cuddle you all the time. Oh my God. And my kids are now too old for that. And it's like, I mean, my 17-year-old, I haven't even attempted to cuddle them for I don't know how many years. But my 12-year-old, she's still little. And I like, you're so cute. And it drives me crazy, right? So I have that like moon thing. But what's so fascinating is that I something about my soul, I guess, brought in these two beings who both have moon in Capricorn. And my fifth house is ruled by Capricorn. So I think I see the connection there. But but the other side to me as a mom is always from the time they were old enough to make any kind of mistakes, like whatever, one and a half or two or whatever, on the one hand, I was like super cuddly and all of that, over the top, lovey-dovey. And at the same time, I have no nonsense boundaries, big
Hmm.
time.
Hmm.
Boom. Nope, we're done. You know?
Yep. Yes.
Right. So it's like, that's so, so fascinating. And my older one has a Cancer rising. So there, again, there's this cuddly, cuddly, sweet, sweet feeling.
Mhm.
But I always, when my kids were really little, I was a child therapist. And one of the things I would always teach parents is, okay, don't do the countdown from three thing, right? If you go, oh, don't do that. Three, two, one, five, six, seven, eight. Like, what is this
Yep.
kid going to learn? They're going to
Yep.
learn that the boundary is actually when you get to zero or even negative. So they're going to
Mm.
keep doing the thing the whole time you're counting down. If you actually need them to stop, never do the countdown, right?
Yep.
To me, that's very Capricorn, like very like the boundary is here.
Yep.
It's non-negotiable. I'm not
Yep.
going to yell about it. I'm not going to
Yep.
scream. I'm not, but boom, it's right here.
Mhm. Mhm.
So we got
Yes.
like you're being contained
Mhm.
very, very firmly and clearly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fascinating.
I really love that, Martha, and I think that's such a great point to end on for Mars in Cancer because I think, something that I've heard different kind of people and colleagues and teachers talk about with Mars in Cancer is Mars in Cancer, again, right? The essential nature of Mars is it's invigorating, it's provocative, right? Mars is bloodlusty. Like bloodlust is like it's part of Mars, right? It's more about how one directs it and how one collaborates with that that desire, which is part of being alive, right? Um, to me, one of the issues with Mars and Cancer is Mars and Cancer has this really powerful, spot on intuitive sense and can sense when something is wrong, but doesn't always have um, the the accuracy around like how wrong is this or like what's actually wrong. It just kind of senses like, oh, something's wrong, right? So one thing to really watch out for, I think, with Mars and Cancer is making something bigger than what it is, right?
Mm.
I think Mars and Cancer is, especially as a transit for all of us, can be challenging because Mars inflames, right? And it might inflame in kind of the wrong places, or we see the wrong area of life being inflamed. The problem may be bigger than we think it is, or the problem may be less acute than what we think it is. I think Mars in Cancer can blow up a problem way beyond what it actually is. And
Well,
so I think keeping a cool head with Mars in Cancer is the moral of the story. Like just keep a cool head. Things may not mean what you think it means, right? And if you're feeling really triggered by something, um, take a little bit of extra time to care for the self and then to communicate honestly.
mm,
To me, the antidote to Mars and Cancer, or maybe the most powerful medicine, is to be really honest and direct and get to the point.
mm,
Get to the point. Like, why are you feeling the way you're feeling? And tell the person that. And
mm.
don't make it bigger than what it has to be. It's like, I deal with this all the time, right? Like with me and my partner, like sometimes I get really triggered when he does something and I try to make it a bigger thing than what it is. And it actually makes it a lot worse than if I just say, hey, that thing you said specifically made me feel this way. And now I'm gonna cry in front of you because it hurts, and then we're done, right? Like we come to a resolution, we come to a reconciliation, and we move on. We bandage the wound and we let it heal in time. That to me is kind of the Mars in Cancer. Um, yeah, I think Mars in Cancer teaches us the wisdom of being really clear and really honest with what's the problem here.
Mm. Yeah, beautiful. I'm also thinking that, on this in the first eclipse, Jupiter, it's a wide square, but Jupiter is really going to be squaring the moon and the sun.
Mm.
also.
Yeah.
And so Jupiter squaring the moon, the full
Mhm.
moon in Pisces. I could definitely imagine, and then that Pisces moon ruling Mars in Cancer, right? So yeah, I could see emotions getting really big.
Yeah.
Um, and then I love how you're saying, yeah, the series in Capricorn over there, maybe balancing, helping us to feel like held and grounded, and so we can regulate and be fully present with, not ignore those feelings and verbalize them,
Yeah.
but do that in a holding container, right? Like be held at the same time that we're honest and, yeah, authentic with all
Exactly.
of it. Yeah.
Exactly. Mhm.
Mhm. And then it brings the very last point I was going to make about Mars and Cancer, what I was feeling when you were talking a couple phases ago was, again, with Mars and Cancer ruling the North Node in Aries,
Mm.
when that Aries part of us is wanting the answer, we're wanting the exact truth, we're wanting the exact solution, la la la. Well, Mars is ruling that in Cancer, so
Mhm.
this is a very watery, emotionally based, maybe wisdom or answer that's going to come forward, or that our or emotional body actually maybe needs to be part of the conversation, not maybe, like
Yes.
it does. Um, and yeah, anyway, so.
Mhm. Beautiful. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think you summed it up so um perfectly. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Martha. This is so exciting, and I just really love talking astrology with you.
You
So
too.
fun.
Do you want to share, I know you have a program coming up. It's starting in early October.
Yeah, I have a course coming up called Shapeshifting Academy, and I think for the purpose of your audience, it's basically 6 weeks of looking at the mutable signs and looking at their rulers. I'm picking the traditional rulers, Jupiter and Mercury, and essentially building a praxis with them. And really what lies at the core of this offering is something that I feel like I've been working through all my life, which is as a very mutable person, I feel like my path is one that's always like winding. And for a while, I was always kind of, raising my fist up and being like, why am I given this lot in life? Right. But I think what I've learned through walking this path is, oh no, actually, there's intelligence in being with changes, in being with things that shift. And so this offering wants to be talked about in a very playful way, which is kind of new for me because usually I can get pretty serious. I love being pretty serious and pretty nerdy and pretty Virgo, but yeah, this offering is kind of coming through in like a very Gemini way because I think an important medicine to working with the ever-changing nature of reality is humor.
Mm.
It's gotta have fun, and like and for pretty serious people, which I think, a lot of Virgo risings can be, humor can be one of the most difficult things because, I was recently reminded of the story of the birth of Mercury. Here's someone who has a lot of words, but nobody trusted them. Nobody believed Mercury from
Uh,
the beginning, right? There's that story of Mercury lying, actually, within the first day of being alive or being incarnated. But the funny thing about Mercury's lies is nobody believed Mercury, so here's this trickster energy, right? That's kind of unpredictable. And I think a lot of people, myself included, who identify with being an artist or with being a creator, sometimes need to really let ourselves go there, like play the trickster a little bit. And something about this offering that I want to bring in too is that we're also working with Jupiter, right? So it's not just trickster, trickster, trickster. There's also a quality here of like, what is the wisdom of the trickster,
mm,
right? And it's so interesting, Martha, because it's such a difficult thing. We like to talk about trickster, but nobody really likes experiencing trickster
mm,
within themselves and in society. Like we still are so scared of the trickster nature of reality and the trickster nature within ourselves. And so, yeah, I guess this is my trickster offering.
Love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's starting on October 3rd. I would love to yeah, invite anybody who feels interested and wanting to deepen into these aspects in astrology. I think it's really great for people who see themselves as, mutable and shape-shifting, but I think it's also probably even more needed for people who are more fixed, or more cardinal in their orientation. Yeah. So,
And it sounds so perfect because, again, we're about to have the nodes switch into mutable signs, right? So all
mm,
of us from January of 2025 for 18 months, we're going to have this very, very strongly mutable energy going on for everything. Um,
yes.
yeah, so it's perfect
Yes.
timing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah. And so yours starts the day after the solar eclipse, the second of these two eclipses. And
Correct.
my eclipse gathering, the second one is going to be the day before the second eclipse.
Mhm.
So anyway, anybody interested in either of those, please join us and just connect with us in general. If you don't follow Jonathan yet, please do. I'll put the link for your podcast and your beautiful newsletter.
Mm.
With this video and anything else, your website and anything
Yeah,
else?
I think that's it. Yeah. Um, My podcast is called Healing the Spirit. I think that's it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Yay. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Love
Thank you,
to
Martha.
hear. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
We would love to hear your thoughts. See you all soon.
Take care.